session, and also in OPEC, the foreign ministers were leading the ministerial meetings last year in Jeddah. New circumstances in the market have caused that the consumption curve steps ahead of that of production in recent years. Short-sighted views of energy investment advisors, due to lack of their precise prediction of energy consumption of emerging developing economic powers such as China and India, is a main reason of present disturbed energy market. This condition intertwined with reliance on certain Western stock exchange markets, in which speculation is overwhelmingly widespread and has resulted in the oil price soaring extraordinarily. As a result, energy and foreign policy in international relations have noted together more than ever, and energy security, including security of demand, has turned to be the fundamental aspect of major players' foreign policy. China, India, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, EU countries, and US are among those whose foreign policy is entwined around energy security of demand and supply. Even US foreign policy is now more entangled in energy compared with 50s, when America founded, funded, and waged a coup d'etat against Iranian democratically elected government that had just nationalized Iranian oil industry. Consequently, this need to energy security has instigated a trend of rivalry or even conflict in three categories: among major consumers, among major producers, and among consumers and producers. Consumers, in an effort to secure their energy supply, are endeavoring to conquer more and more contracts to share production in oil and gas fields and its transportation to consuming markets. However, this enthusiasm of various consumers or transit countries for making more contracts has instigated a conflict of interests among them, whose major indicator is impulsiveness. This impulsiveness has brought about, in many cases, disregarding economic logic, and in some cases, overriding purely political motivations. An instance of this hastiness can be witnessed in Caspian Sea littoral states oil and gas projects, such as Trans-Caspian gas pipeline and Baku-Ceyhan oil pipeline, and some Caspian offshore investments. While experts believe that Iran's route was the safest, shortest, and the most economic passage for Central Asian oil and gas transit to the outside world, and despite of high possibility of environmental disasters, Baku-Ceyhan oil pipeline was built and Trans-Caspian gas pipeline construction is being stressed. Ignoring of realistic estimation of oil companies companies are busy with digging empty oil wells in Caspian Sea. Another example is huge funds some countries, including China, hurriedly overinvested in African oil industry that appeared later to be misallocated. Price of about $100 per barrel of oil, which is much less likely to dramatically plunge compared to a decade ago, and has reduced the fear of its sudden fall at one point or another, has unfortunately stimulated some producers to be rivals and just care for their short-term interests hastily, and in some cases be advocates of others' interests so as to acquire more liquidity in a particular period of time for development and other purposes. Nevertheless, these countries ought to observe the fact of continued devaluation of US dollar that does not enjoy a proper backup and even worse has transferred the increase in the oil price to a nominal one. On the other hand, the purchase power of income of each barrel of oil is less than early 80s. Discovering new long-term ways to enable producers cope with future monetary complexities is essential. This is why nowadays oil and gas-related transactions can be made with other currencies or a basket of currencies. But the third category describes the consumer-producer conflict, which arises mostly from profiteering intents, political unskillfulness, or hegemonic intentions which overshadows economic and technical logic. Due to political interventions and cold conflicts by few major consumers to contain and influence an individual producer's policies, the consumer may also embargo the producer, prevent others from investment in producer's energy industry, and resort to other means and mechanisms to contain the major producer from active interaction in the market. When these measures are taken, no matter with which format and within which framework, extraterritorial or international loose links in producers' chain are created and correspondingly act counterproductive in the market, and what remains after all is imbalance and market distortion. US-Iran and US-Venezuela disputes are crystal clear examples of this kind of conflict. It has jeopardized production and transit of energy, and the resultant uncertainty produces bizarre, sharp growth of prices. What has been mentioned so far was mainly about fossil energy. Because of its easier and cheaper availability, its current share in total energy consumption is about 80% and projected increase up to end of next decade if economic growth and the growth of middle class of developing countries and oil prices remain as it is. Although sharp increase of prices of oil in recent years has caused high motivation for investment in developing of oil fields, but simultaneously investment incentives for research and operation in nuclear and non-conventional energy fields has been increased. This is inevitable because fossil energy is not sustainable and will be finished within few decades. However, there are political and financial and legal obstacles on the way, and if they are not removed, we can imagine early death of economy because of lack of alternative energy source. Now the most experienced and viable energy source is nuclear, because solar, geothermal, wind, and biomass sources have not been shifted from pilot scales to industrial scale in general. But the main obstacle for generalizing of nuclear energy is monopolized of this technology and even some non-conventional energy technologies by few countries and companies in such a way that if some countries intend to have access to them, will be punished. As an example, for successful and sustainable managing of nuclear powerhouse, there should be a fuel management, which means having of capability for manufacturing of uranium fuel in a complicated process, including enrichment. Although the strict control mechanism for this process in framework of NPT exists, but some countries ignore this mechanism, and having access to enrichment technology according to their view is a taboo. However, not only breaking of this taboo for Zionist regime is permitted, but even having nuclear weapon for them is allowed. Some powers intend to establish a monopoly for fuel production in order to depend all countries' nuclear energy to few nuclear powers, and even they are not ready to invest in these countries for enrichment. This view is not a constructive one and cannot result a solution way for tackling of energy crisis. To remove all distortions, we need to cooperate and we need to explore new ways and means of cooperation. In this regard, new cooperation arena, new partners, and new mechanisms for cooperation have to be discovered and promoted. However, there are some pivotal elements for new phases of cooperation that I believe can be mentioned as below. Collectivity, which means more hands, the better results. Utility of win-win solutions, collaboration of all producers and all consumers, which helps to avoid loose links in the energy market. Necessity of financial and monetary cooperation among producers. Depoliticizing energy market and investment that will assist economic rationale to rule over the market. Vitality of environment conservations. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audiences, ultimately, since these elements partially or wholly have to materialize in pragmatic solution, I herewith put forward some suggestions before this August gathering. 1. Joint investments by producers who have more common understanding in a producer country's downstream and upstream industries is a viable means to minimize the destructive interference of some consumers with a specific political agenda. Iran and Russia, Iran and UAE, or Iran and Oman cooperation are current instances which are progressing. Low-cost but environmental friendlier technologies of oil and gas, investment in and promotion of technologies for oil fields recovery and rig platforms, including their technology transfer, are examples of investment targets for timely injection of oil into market, as well as keeping the market stable and demand satisfied. 2. Another promising means is the establishment of International Bank of Energy. Inventions of such a financial institution could place part of prepared petro income of producers in their own hands for global energy sources developments instead of letting it collected and managed by others. It could also help them with investment needs with the capital market is not prepared or geared with required funds. However, this does not rule out the possibility of introduction of some specific financial arrangements that embrace particular producers and consumers together for identifiable intentions and facilitation of performing joint projects and money transfer within broader framework of oil and gas industry. 3. Establishment of bourses or stock exchange market within producers' territories for energy trade has to be explored and promoted. Through such an establishment, market distortions out of consumers and speculators' interventions can be minimized and consequently the price and market could be stabilized. It is worth mentioning that Iran is now putting up such a market in Kish Island in Persian Gulf that